Welcome to the Cyber Insurance News and Information Podcast. I'm the Executive Editor of Cyber Insurance News, Martin Hinton, and joining me today is Jessica Newman, the Global GM of Cyber Insurance at Sophos. They've got some big news that they just announced we're going to get into. But off the bat, right away, first of all, Jessica, thanks so much for joining us today. How's your day going so far?
Martin, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And it's been a really exciting day so far for Sophos.
It has been. That's a little tease. We're going to get into that in a second. But I think the headline really is that your professional career started as a high school principal. How do you go from high school principal to global GM of cyber insurance at Sophos?
That is a golden question, isn't it? I spent about 13 years working for Denver Public Schools. I was a teacher working with a lot of really kind of struggling youth in Denver. Got to eventually start up my own high school, which was really awesome. And just realized very quickly that, cybersecurity was something that really impacts kids and really impacts career pathways for kids. Had some kids dealing with cyber bullying. I even had a student who was unfortunately wrapped up into a trafficking issue. I just, as a new mom and an educator, was becoming really interested in cybersecurity. And I ended up, after 5 years of running a high school, I ended up resigning and starting up a LinkedIn account and friending everyone in Boulder County to understand, what cybersecurity is and what jobs in that space look like. And was really lucky to find a few companies who gave me a shot. And I think, honestly, Martin, I think teachers are the best sellers out there. Teachers understand how to take really complicated topics and break them down into bite-sized topics. They understand how to speak to people where they are and how to move them along at a pace where they can learn and understand things. And I think that's exactly what a successful salesperson does. And so tech and data and cybersecurity business development has surprisingly come quite naturally out of my education background.
Yeah, you fall back on you explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader kind of
I feel like if I can talk an 18-year-old into staying in school, then usually I can convince somebody that their cyber controls matter as well.
I mean, we'll get into it, but it is an industry in a field where a greater level of broad understanding is called for in some respects. But we can touch on that. You're at Sophos now. Tell me about Sophos.
Sophos is an amazing company. It's a massive global company. I think we have over 600,000 customers globally. I think north of 35,000 of those customers are MDR customers, and so just a massive scale there to really have some fun with in the insurance space. Our MDR is highly rated. It's a trusted vendor in the space. Recently Sophos acquired SecureWorks too, which is an IR operation that was highly regarded in the insurance space before, and now we have that within our purview as well. So really, everything from small and medium-sized businesses to large enterprises is where Sophos plays now, and we have leadership that is very bullish on cyber insurance. They are incredibly supportive, and they understand that that's a space that is worth us playing meaningfully in. And so, they recruited me last summer to build out an insurance channel for them.
And in respect to that, there's some news this week involving Spektrum Labs that we covered here, and we're going to be posting this next week, so it'll be last week. But tell me about that new latest news, the hot off the presses element of what's going on.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Excuse me, it's pretty exciting. So Spektrum is really serving as our technical partner. They are basically a transaction layer where we have a marketplace of carrier partners and a broker network as well. Keeping that broker tent as wide as possible, knowing that brokers are incredibly important player in the cyber insurance motion. I think that's where a lot of these initiatives have actually failed in the past is by sort of underestimating the important role that a broker plays, or forcing people to use one broker or another. We're purposely keeping a very large broker tent for this motion. But basically, what Spektrum is doing is really unique. They are tapping into Sophos MDR telemetry, and basically creating a very seamless motion for a customer to essentially prove that they've purchased and configured MDR properly, and then essentially via API sending that information as well as some firmographic information out to the carriers who are um, basically trusting their green lighted token, API token, and rewarding those customers with enhanced insurance terms. So working with a carrier panel that also makes sure that we're catching, carriers that have an appetite for small and medium sized customers, as well as mid market and larger enterprise. Working with name brand global carriers who understand that Sophos MDR is a really meaningful cyber control that actually does reduce loss ratio. And so rewarding those customers with enhanced terms. And all of this is done in a matter of a few minutes. So really in a few minutes, a customer can validate their controls and receive quotes to cross compare and bind one of those quotes in collaboration with their broker.
I should mention we had a few episodes ago we had Max Perkins on from Spektrum Labs, so I'm familiar with him and the company to the degree that one can be in
Yes.
short order. So you touched on a couple of things there that I guess I wasn't planning to ask about now, but I'm gonna. So you mentioned the speed with which you can be assessed, I guess, through the app, the tool. That's huge now for small and medium sized sort of companies, or particularly smaller companies. Am I right in what I've read and seen and been told in places that, speed of, having your, excuse me, the big thing you touched on, two things really. There's you can't just say you have it anymore. You got to say you have it and then prove you have it with regard to the safety and security around cyber. And then an easy way to do that for small and medium-sized businesses that are already pressured. A lot of small businesses have trouble doing the business, never mind working on the business. Are those two sort of pillars of this that are the big things for people to take away?
Yeah, it's really an effort to take away the friction that currently exists in that whole process where, customers are often faced with, lengthy applications. They're answering yes, no, I have something or I don't have something in place. And then insurers are in an awkward situation where they're just, believing that, or just hoping and praying that the customer is actually doing what they say that they're doing. And then, then there's ambiguity potential there when there is a claim. Did you really have MFA, or MDR enabled across your whole environment? Did you respond to these high level alerts? Did you patch certain vulnerabilities quickly? It's that kind of verifiable evidence that really sort of makes insurance work exactly as it should, rather than just based on a hope and a prayer. And I think, we're in a moment where carriers, for example, are extremely hungry for MDR telemetry. They understand that MDR is a game changer as a security control. So underwriters are looking for MDR more and more. Um, Not all carriers really want to handle raw data, raw telemetry, right? They don't necessarily need that, but having a token from Spektrum is essentially packaging up that data in such a way that it's extremely consumable for the carrier, and they know that it's been green lighted and tested as sort of a pre-underwriting motion that then gives their underwriters confidence to offer terms. And so it's a unique play.
Remembering that story I did very early in my career in television about Underwriters Laboratory, the idea that you can certify something for being safe in this environment with these parameters and that sort of thing. This is about creating an uh, you mentioned the word friction, but there's also with regard to cyber and the threats, there's a bit of a fog around the dangers. This is all about making the process more uniform. I say that because you've been doing this a little bit now, and this particular form of insurance has changed dramatically even since you entered the field. I wonder whether you might start sort of, what was different when you started, or when you came into it, what did you encounter with regard to, say, the relationship between underwriters and brokers, and how risk was assessed and policies was written? What are the big changes you've seen in the, well, how long is it now? Is it,
It's been about 7 years now in cybersecurity total, and it's been about 5 in the insurance space. And it really started. I was selling dark web data for a company in Denver called Dark Owl, um, and I was just lucky enough that they gave me a shot to see where I would fit in their company, and they were really gracious enough to give me a chance. And one of the first deals that that I closed was actually Cowbell. Cowbell was in beta at the time. Uh, Coalition had launched, but it was very, very early on. At Bay had launched, but it was very early. So these MGAs were really these cyber focused MGAs were really just coming to market back in 2021. And I would say that those it was really I then went to work for Cowbell after that. And I think having that lens into what that kind of business having a lens into what kind of data that business is looking for was really instrumental for me. I learned right away at Cowbell that inside out data is something that insurers are really hungry for. There are, for example, all kinds of outside what we call outside in risk scanning that really great companies like Security Scorecard and BitSight and all of them do, and that's more publicly accessible data. Obviously, it's not so easy to create a crawler that goes and scans and touches upon several hundred data points and collects it all and makes a concise report on a company's threat posture. But what insurers lack is that inside out data, like what is going on under the hood of these companies, what's beyond the firewall. That's the kind of data that really helps underwriters price and select risk. And so it was really important for me to understand that that's where the best of the best, the people that are solely focused on cyber, the people that are most digitally enabled and data enabled, that's what they're looking for, and that sort of informed my view into the market. From there, I went and worked at Acrisure Cyber Services, which is a massive brokerage serving customers all over the world. And that was a really interesting lens as well, seeing what the broker's role in the conversation is, and how those conversations go between brokers and end customers. At Cowbell, it's you're removed from the policyholder when you're sitting at the carrier in the carrier's chair. They're not the ones talking directly to customers, it's the brokers who are. And so it's almost like insurance, there's kind of it's almost like telephone tag. There's just so many players and different audiences, and they all have different incentives, they all have different sales cycles. These are the nuances that you kind of have to understand when you're thinking about how to put something together that's a large scale sort of strategic play like the one that we announced today.
I mean, in thinking about the way that you touched on it now, and when we spoke before the podcast, you talked about how brokers and buyers and carriers, they talk past each other. Do you think that has slowed the growth of, say, cyber, or is that just inherent to the complexity of insurance in general? Or I mean, I'm just curious whether
I
or not
think
there's. Go
I,
ahead.
I think it's just human nature, honestly. I think that any salesperson is going to sell the thing that they feel most confident talking about. And so, if I sell MDR and email security, I'm not going to feel very comfortable talking about cyber insurance. And if I sell property and casualty insurance, then I may or may not feel extremely comfortable talking about specifically cyber insurance. And so, it's there's a massive education effort underway to help other people, help other audiences understand the complexities of cyber insurance. And I think it's important to just keep that in perspective. It's not like you can just tell something tell something to someone once and they get it. It's got to be a message that's repeated over and over. And I think the battle we face is that, it's nuanced, it's complex. And so you really have to move people into a place of comfort before they're able to evangelize and speak about it at scale.
I mean, so this sort of moves us into the next topic, and we sort of touched on this with the Spectrum Labs Sophos news. But what Sophos is trying to build is something that addresses, I don't know, what would it be, like the early issues of the childhood of the cyber insurance business, that it came along in a weird way, and then ransomware had the impact it had, and we're in a, what is it, a flat cycle now? The pricing, with regard to pricing, you, you try to build something that sort of settles this MDR loop. When you're talking about, say, you know, what I think, like what are the MDR providers giving carriers that they want? I mean, like any business, you're solving a problem that exists. Information is that problem.
Yep.
Data, outcomes, guarantees. What kinds of things are the carriers coming to you for? Do you see them not asking for that they need? Tell me about that part of what it is you guys do.
Yeah, the MDR telemetry is critical to assessing risk ultimately, because the problem is with endpoint and with XDR, as it's called, is you can it's sort of like you can have the fanciest tool out there, but if you don't know how to use it and you don't know how to configure it and you don't know how to manage it, or you don't have a team to manage it 24/7, it's just not going to serve you. It's kind of like an 8-year-old who has a fancy Apple MacBook and only uses it to just search on Google. It's like you're if you don't know how to utilize endpoint, and if somebody's not watching it carefully for you, then it's not as effective of a tool at predicting or assessing risk. MDR is a totally different ballgame, and I think carriers know it. And it's because there is a massive trusted team constantly watching it. It's Friday afternoon. You may or may not have a security team that's watching the network on, Christmas Eve or on Friday after or Sunday afternoon. But, if you're using a reputable MDR service like Sophos, you can just kind of rest assured that somebody's watching it for you. And if there's an issue, someone's going to let you know. And so, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was going to say, all of this feels new, right? The way we think about the sort of vapor of data and the information we store in companies and that sort of thing. But what you just touched on then is the idea that if you've got something valuable, let's say it's an office building, we'll make it up as a digital office building. The idea of having 24-hour, 7-day a week, 365-day year security is not a complex thing to comprehend. I've got laptops in there and all sorts of other things, files and records and contracts. We've moved all these things we value into digital spaces. And what you're describing now is an efficient way for it to be protected all the time. And that means that people ensuring its existence feel more comfortable charging what they do. Am I simplifying it too much?
No, not at all. I think you're simplifying it to a perfect degree. And I often use the analogy of home security or physical security because that's a mental framework that people seem to understand. And I think, from where Sophos sits, you know, for us, it doesn't really matter if it's a hard market or if it's a soft market in terms of insurance. We just want our customers to win. We want them to have access to best in class cyber insurance options, whether that's happens to be at the moment, priced less, or when that shifts and it becomes a very hard market and cyber insurance is incredibly hard to acquire. MDR is going to be what gets them there. So it's an insurability factor as well. And that's really important, I think, because when you think about the insurance and, when you think about cyber insurance, as a larger market, it's going to go through cycles. It's going to shift and change. Risk appetite is going to shift and change. And that's exactly what it should do. There's going to be times when carriers are, bullish on healthcare, or times when they're really nervous about schools, or whatever it is. But we want to make sure that our customers are winning really no matter what the cyber insurance cycle is in at the time. And I think this play does that because no matter what, MDR is either going to lead to some sort of enhanced coverage or premium discount, regardless of the type of market that we're in.
That layer of it, like what it takes to be insurable for cyber now, is in 2026. What does it mean in practical terms to be insurable? I mean, you've got controls in place, the ability to prove they exist and that they're working the way that they're supposed to 24/7. What are the layers to insurability that achieve some of those discounts and, you know, I guess, ideal policy conditions from both parties' perspective?
The typical players are gonna continue to be the typical players. I mean, there's no cyber application that's ever gonna not ask about MFA, data backup, an incident response plan, cybersecurity awareness training. Those things are gonna stick around. I think the what we will move away from is the question, or hopefully move away from, is the words "Do you have?" I think, do you have it? It leads to yes or no. It's a binary sort of, I think, less complex question. I think what we're going to move towards is tell us more about how you've enabled or configured your data backup, your MFA, your MDR. So I think that's where it's shifting, or at least starting to shift. And then I think MDR too is not necessarily, that was not table stakes before. That was not part of the kind of top. I wouldn't say it was mandatory to have MDR in order to be insurable before. I think as I think when the market does harden again, when loss ratios are outrageously high, I think that's going to shift. I do think that MDR has a potential to become table stakes in the future.
With regard to that and where the industry is now, when we spoke before, I think you used the phrase, we're at mile 10, not the finish line. And I guess that's a marathon at mile 10, not mile 10 of a half marathon. Take me through sort of the reality check of where the market is now as you see it.
Yeah, I'd say, back when I was working, several years ago back at Cowbell, I would be at a dinner party and someone would ask me what I do, and it would take me at least, like a 9 sentence paragraph to explain what it is that I do. And I think now we're at least in like 2 to 3 sentence territory. I think that people genuinely are starting to understand, completely outside of the cyber insurance space. I think people now conceptually understand what cyber risk is, that companies are being hacked, that it happens to everyone, that it's, this digital world that we're in is just a larger attack surface for threat actors. And so we're not fighting that education battle as much anymore. I think that we're much more sophisticated. I think carriers too are much more sophisticated now about pricing and assessing cyber risk. I think, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, it was really just sort of, you know, thumb to the finger to the wind a little bit. We are much more measured and sophisticated now, but I still wouldn't put us much past mile 10. I still think that continuous underwriting, continuous verifiable evidence-based underwriting is not in the direct near future across the board. I think that there are some early acting large global carriers that happen to be more kind of uh, less adverse to risk and more comfortable trying new things, and being kind of more playing in this more innovative space. And I think when those carriers prove that kind of underwriting works really well in terms of, lowering loss ratio, minimizing claims, things like that, there will be fast following that comes after.
I mean, one of the things that, so thinking about insurance, you renew your homeowners once a year, depending on your source of health insurance. Maybe that's something you deal with once a year. But even if you're at a company providing it, there's the once a year select your benefits or confirm your benefits sort of window of time. With regard to cyber, that's not the case ideally because of the nature of the threat, the nation state back. No, there's no geofencing. It can come from anywhere, 7 days a week, middle of the night, which is often when it does come. Do you think that that sort of need for the constant monitoring kind of attention in the policy and the underwriting is something that might come to pass? Or do you think that that's, like we were discussing a little bit ago, needing to have you don't have a security guard at your office for the first 10 years you're in business. It's there because the threat's there, the need for security is there. Do you think that that's the case, or do you see it evolving away to a place where it's a little more like other forms of insurance?
I think both of what you just said is true. I mean, I do think that a lot of carriers out there have a desire to do continuous underwriting and to even have premium, fluctuating month to month or whatever it is. In an ideal world, I think that sort of dynamic pricing with cyber insurance could be really interesting. And I know that some carriers have tackled that. I think the problem is they just haven't had the continuous telemetry to do that continuous underwriting. The big X factor that's missing in the room is the data, the telemetry, the proof. And so because they don't have that, it's really difficult to be, you know, chasing such a dynamic risk as cyber. You're right. I mean, it shifts month to month, war to war, country to country. There's so many factors the size of your business, the industry class of your business. I mean, there are just a million factors that go into determining what kind of risk factor you have. Um, but to date, it just hasn't really been possible, especially because, and even vendors that do have the ability to supply continuous telemetry, they might not have the scale. They might have, a few hundred or a few thousand MDR customers, and that's helpful for sure. But I think what makes what today's announcement I think is unique is because Sophos has that scale. We have this massive global customer base, which gives us a really rich data lake around, points of compromise and trends and all of that kind of rich threat actor data, threat intelligence, and that MDR that informs the MDR telemetry, and then given to carriers, elucidates so much more of what's going on under the surface than just yes, no, I have it or I don't.
I mean, you touched on something. I mean, I don't like you mentioned war, which obviously with Iran currently one of the big cyber crime players, shall we say? There is this dynamic to it. But what you touched on just now is that even with the complexity, even with the complexity around the sources of the threat actors, who's motivating them beyond money. I mean, it's largely just money, but there are other motivations, obviously. There is an improvement in the pricing of this risk, right? I mean, it is getting better. Things are being worked out. I guess what I'm getting at is that the idea is that there's sort of a, throw the dart at the board kind of with your eyes closed mentality. That's not what we're talking about. That there's a real thirst to see this form of insurance grow, and in doing that, they've got to seek out the ability to price risk more accurately. And part of that is what you were just touching on. Is that what you see as well, or am I wrong?
Absolutely. I think you're hitting it right on the head. I mean, um, it's not lack of desire. I think that pricing and selecting risk is difficult. I think it's just the data to do so has been missing historically, and so that's what we're aiming to provide.
Now you touch on data and you touch on the amount of information, the volume of information. I mean, again, I'm not a huge fan of using the warfare analogies outside of real warfare, but there is a constant to this that reminds me of that old, warning about plans and that they don't survive contact. And if you're existing in a digital environment as a business, you're constantly in contact with the forces that could cause a business interruption or a data breach that results in, who knows what or how long. You might be discovering that there's records you didn't realize you're even retaining that are suddenly now on the dark web. That reality to this is one that my grandfather-in-law ran an insurance brokerage in North Kansas City, and he would talk about how it was like this segmented routine. I remember years and years ago, it's him telling me about his business. And again, with cyber, there's a very different approach. It's there could be a fire any day. You could have a cyber attack any day. You have to have that kind of mentality about it. And there isn't really the fire department version of the cyber police, if you will. And I guess what I'm curious about is as we see the data become more analyzed and the evolution of the industry grows, do you see like the need for sharing of information across different groups, and that there might be the need for a bigger pool of this information coming from, I don't even know what sources might be, to again continue the evolution with regard to having more information that allows for a better analysis of what threats exist and when they might be changing. I mean, the monthly dynamic pricing struck me as a really, really a non-insurance kind of variation, and a, a malleability to the way things are done that is not something people would normally associate with their insurance policies.
I think that, I mean, it would be my North Star that there's a lot more information sharing. I mean, I think we've done a better job as an industry around that. And now that we have a 5, 6+ years of look back into, at least these new kind of newer MGAs on the scene. I mean, cyber insurance is older than the last 4 or 5 years. But I think post COVID, you saw the attack surface at companies grow, and you saw adoption, I think, really pick up from that era. And so now we have this look back, right? When now the industry at large is really doubling down and serious about data collection, loss and claims data. Um, and companies are putting out great threat reports, left and right. I saw coalitions today. Sophos just released one a week or two ago. That there is a lot of really high level thought leadership that's coming out, but I think that nobody wants to really put the real numbers on nobody's outwardly talking about the details and specifics around their claims and loss data. Obviously, I think in an ideal world, yes, we're all on the same team. I mean, at the very end of the day, it's kind of good folks against threat actors, and we just want our customers to not have to worry about this stuff. We want them to be able to focus on what it is they do every day, whether it's a dentist or a school or whatever. They shouldn't have to worry about it. And so that's what I love about Sophos MDR and about this insurance play is it's making it insanely um accessible and attractive to somebody who is maybe not a practitioner, maybe not a cybersecurity trained individual, but just wants their business protected and wants to know that if on the in the worst case scenario something fails, or my secretary clicks on something, or my HR person accidentally clicks on something, that if we do experience a loss, it's going to be mitigated very quickly. It's going to be contained, and it's going to be a much cheaper loss than it would have been otherwise. So I think it's not about perfection. It's just about getting better, I think. And I think the industry as a whole is in earnest really doing that, and is acting, hopefully more collaboratively with each other.
You touched on, I think, my observation as an outsider is that having been to a few conventions, and I was at one earlier in the week in New York City, there is an energy about people in this space, whether it's the lawyers or the underwriters or the brokers or people in the security side of it, whether it's MDRs or something else. There is, at least having done journalism for over 30 years, spending a lot of time with people, trying to learn how to read them and sort of gauge their honesty versus what they're saying. So back to our, you say you've got it, but are you really honest? This idea, there is this energy about it, which I only say because it's an observation I've made independently of yours, that there is this, we have a problem. There are solutions to be had. There are solutions that we don't know that we're going to create that are going to come down the road. And all of that is, again, what's exciting about it to me as an outsider, as a journalist. That's sort of the core of any good business: is you find a problem, You find a solution people are willing to pay for, and that's how you pay your bills. And I think in a very simple way, there's a real, like, early days. I don't like the phrase gold rush, but that level of enthusiasm around figuring out how to do this, figuring out how to do it well with regard to things like the security and the underwriting, and combining the sort of MDR with the policies and discounts that come along with that, and being sure that people, when you do your driving insurance, or you do, oh, have you ever had had a ticket in the last 5 years? You just say no, whether you have it or not. But now we're going to check your driving record, right? That idea is something about the business that frankly, I was surprised to encounter, because, well, let's be honest, it's insurance. It's not something that I mean, you could throw the word cyber in front of it and maybe .com once upon a time, but there is that there. I mean, am I wrong in reading that? Do you get
You're
that?
not. It's so funny because all my friends are teachers and, none of them can really believe that I've kind of gone this route. And, my teacher friends are really fun people. They have summers off. They're they like to enjoy and travel and see the world, and it's a fun group typically. When I pivoted into and sort of became more and more entrenched in this niche of cyber insurance, I kept hearing people say, you know, nobody really intentionally goes into insurance. They just quote unquote fall into it, which is exactly what I did. But I couldn't be more pleasantly surprised, honestly. I mean, insurance people are honestly really fun. And I'm glad that you're picking up on that energy. I think, you know, it's a space where there can be a lot of creativity and building, and there are folks out there that are eager and hungry to do that. It's not necessarily this kind of old school, um, you know, uh, I'm not thinking of the best way to say it, but kind of entrenched old school thinking, kind of conservative. I mean, there is that element sometimes, but I just think in general, there is a lot of energy. There's a lot of fun. Brokers are a super fun group. Carriers can be, everyone is ultimately, it's a smallish family. And I think, you know, there's a very healthy collegial, really community within this cyber insurance space that I really value a lot.
You touched on it there, and it sort of moves us into the beginning of the next topic, and it's the future or what's coming next. And I don't think you could do anything in this world nowadays that would be considered journalism and not ask about AI. So here we are, the 800,000 pound gorilla in everyone's room now: the economy, cybersecurity, cyber defense, cyber crime. Let's just throw it out there: AI. So what's that done in your world to date, and what are the hopes that it might do going forward in regard to any number of the things we've discussed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if I were more technical, I would probably have even more thoughts on it. But I think as it is today, AI is making making manual work, like things, for example, like looking up NAICS codes, for example. Things that have been traditionally very manual tasks, it's obviously making those things much easier and faster. I think in terms of AI generated quoting, pricing, data, and loss analysis, I think it's being used to monitor, portfolios of risk and portfolio performance. I think it's doing a lot of things very well. I don't, or at least to make our lives, I guess, easier and more efficient. But I don't think that it's a tool that reduces friction, but I don't think it's yet like the core product of what we're doing necessarily in the cyber, and is certainly in the cyber insurance space. It's being used as a tool. Um, and it's not necessarily, I don't think, transforming everything about the way that we price and assess and give out risk, give out policies. And so, um, I think in the cybersecurity space, however, I think that is a different conversation where, you're looking at the world from a attack surface lens. And I think when you have, I think about it as like, almost like Dr. Seuss, like the Butter Battle book. I don't know if you ever read that. It's basically a Cold War, analogy about, kind of weapons amassing on both sides. And I think with AI, it's kind of like that. It's like if the bad guys are using AI, then the good guys need to use AI to combat it. And I know that Sophos is going to lengths to really embed AI into how we're doing things. And that's obviously a whole nother topic. But um, I'm not like an AI good or an AI bad person. I just think it's creating a lot less friction. It's making tasks much easier. I can't off the top of my head think of a specific example where it's the thing that one company is doing to do all of its things yet.
Well, I mean, I think like you, I'm not a technical person, but the idea that I've had in my head is that as the underwriting process demands more data and the assessment requires more information that's, over time and perhaps new, and it gives you an ability to analyze it in a way like any huge volume of data you wouldn't normally be able to do with human beings. And that is again something that, assuming it's reliable and effective and all those sorts of things, it becomes a great tool or potentially great tool in that respect. Um, you touched on it a little bit. The idea of AI is and I appreciate I'm neither good nor bad AI either, but it's everywhere now. Do you? I mean, again, you touched on it. The good guys are using it. The bad guys are using it. Do you think that's an? I mean, we see that, right? Someone's got aircraft. Someone else gets aircraft. Oh, they've got tanks. We've got tanks. That's not uncommon. Do you think it's just that natural sort of? We better make sure we're not missing out on that either, or or as you touched on, there are genuine uses that are there that whether it's just making people more efficient so they can pay more attention to something that's, say, a client. Um, I'm kind of rambling on here a little bit, but
I, I hear
yeah,
what
I
you're
mean, I get.
saying.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think I mean I think you're spot on. I think with AI, it's and I just lost my train of thought just
That's
now.
okay. We
Um,
both we both did. So let me back up a little bit. When we're sort of touching on this very big thing, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
everywhere now.
I
It's
do remember
AI,
what I was gonna say.
and and the idea that I'm sort of curious about is that there's all this stuff that happens in the MDR world that 24/7 and that sort of thing. It's a layer of effectiveness on top of the human beings that decide how it should be organized and how it should be executing its tasks and what it can see and where it can go, what permissions it might have, or what responsibilities it can automate or make agentic. There is the potential for it to become something that serves the defender with great efficiency, as well as the underwriting process where you might have the ability to crunch data far more quickly for the purposes of writing a policy than you would have in the past. And do you think that's a fair way to think about it now? We'll see how it all works out, but what do you think?
I absolutely think that's a fair way to think about it, and I think in general, it's just making all of our work smarter. Um, but what I love, and we talked about this a minute ago, like what I love about the insurance industry is it's so people centric, it's so relationship driven, and it's about trust and relationships. And I just think I really value that about the insurance, specifically the cyber insurance space. Is just you know you can't you have to be a good steward, and you have to care about others, I think, to be taken seriously in this space. And I think, AI is not gonna, there's no replacing that. It's there are, I'm not worried about AI just replacing a bunch of people, whether they're more kind of entry level or not in this space necessarily, because, at the end of the day, it's so people driven. And I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon.
You touched on it. We talk about people. We sort of we've dipped our toes in this topic, but I wonder about the small and medium sized business. And I mean, do you ever encounter or have you heard anecdotes about businesses coming to Sophos or anyone else and thinking, you know what, and you sort of touched on this a bit ago as well. You know, I've sort of realized this is a problem now, and I don't know how well I protect it. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, what do you think about that small and medium-sized space? These incredibly vital business segments for the American economy and many other economies, for that matter. where they are with regard to sort of perception of their risk, and then the ease with which they can seek solutions and help and protection from the insurance side, from the cybersecurity side? What do you think they are in the, I don't know, is it life cycle at are they before or after mile 10?
I think they're definitely a little bit beyond mile 10, honestly. That's my honest take. There might be people out there that very much disagree with that, but I do think it's less and less of a conversation about if you need it. It's more of a conversation about what exactly do you need and how are you going to get it. And that's where, Sophos is a channel driven company. This is a company that very much respects the MSP, the MSSP, the reseller channels. And, the MSPs and MSSPs are the ones that are, really on the front lines with customers. They're the ones that are really being pressured, I think, by a lot of customers about cyber insurance. And when I say pressured, I just mean they're being asked a lot about cyber insurance. And they too are a piece of this puzzle in terms of, seeking solutions that are easy, and again, frictionless. And so that is again where Sophos just sits in a really unique position here to move the market in this way, because our partners really need something to go to back to their customers with. And I think, I want to give them that. I want to give them something very simple that they can, a link that they can pass along. And if their customers have MDR, then they're gonna, click, click, bang into a really great insurance option. So that's my hope. And I think, it's just about making it cost effective. It's about making it incredibly transparent that, like, you're making this investment in your security. And so you should see this ROI, when it relates to your insurance. And if you can really draw that line very clearly, then it makes a lot of sense to a CFO or a CEO of a small and medium sized business, because they get it. They get that that risk is out there. They're just more thinking, all right, how do I, what's the least output I need to protect myself the best? And so, there's just really great bang for your buck solutions that are going to do that. And that's where we want to enable the channel to really have something tangible to give their end customers.
So if I'm a small and medium sized business CFO, and I'm listening to this, and I realize I have no idea, or I'm not sure, and I couldn't pick the CISO out of a lineup, what would I do in the next 30 days to begin the process of sleeping better at night?
Do you have a broker? Do an insurance
So
broker?
no, well, no, no. I mean, so you begin with the process. Let's go with, we know this about small businesses, right? They often start, they move fast. They're focused on the business, right? If they're selling stationery or hammers or whatever it is, they're focused on selling hammers. And the other things, whatever they might be, we need to repaint the coffee room or whatever it is. Those become secondary concerns. And I think a lot of times things that we can't see, particularly if they're not making money, they
Yep.
become secondary concerns. So let's assume we've got zero. I'm at zero. I'm a small business owner. I have no idea. I don't even know what MFA stands for. I don't know what MDR stands for. I don't have an MSP. What does that mean? I have no idea. What do
Yep.
I do? Where do I
Yep.
start?
So, I mean, this is kind of like, I think about myself. I'm married. I have two kids. We both work. On weekends, I just don't want to spend time cleaning my house. It's not a task that I enjoy doing. And so I outsource it, and we have the means to do that. And so I outsource it to people who really know what they're doing and get in here and can actually deep clean, my boy's disgusting bathroom, which is, no easy feat. And so I think the question is, all right, are we buying? Are we building? That's what small and medium sized businesses face. And there are really, really great business decisions to outsource and to not build within. It's expensive to build. Hire, most small businesses out there are not going to hire their own security team to do 24/7 business monitoring. So that's why there are amazing MSPs and MSSPs out there who do this. And I think the first thing that I would do is go find one in your area, and you're asking a lot of questions to that provider about what their values are, how they operate, but how the pricing works. And you want to find one that's really good, one that values, cyber insurance as a risk transfer mechanism, and one that's just aligned with your way of thinking, and you hire them. And in an ideal world, they've got some kind of either a friendly broker they can attach to you, or somewhere to go to find a friendly broker, and they're helping you find a cyber insurance policy. And these things, I mean, I think there's a lot of myth busting still to do out there in the small and medium sized space. I mean, cybersecurity, cyber insurance, these things don't need to break the bank. You can get into a great cyber insurance policy for under $1,500 easily these days. So, and that's $1 million in coverage, which, if you're a small business, like that's probably going to be enough for you. And so, it doesn't, I think people have it in mind that cybersecurity is something that's way out here, that I don't understand it. It's got to cost millions of dollars. I don't have access to that. And that's just not true. I think that you just need to find the right partner to serve you. And I think, once you do that, then you're on your way. I mean, as long as you have someone watching your network and your operational security, then and you've got a cyber insurance policy, you're good to go.
You touch on something that, and I've asked this question of a lot of people. I can't remember whether we discussed it before the podcast, but as a consumer and a business owner myself, I look at the dynamic now within cyber, and it feels like it's if you will, a buyer's market, in the sense that there's a lot of companies out there who are looking to grow. They see it as a growth area, and you can, like you said, go talk to a few MSPs in your area, or whatever else it might be, and there is the ability for them to create a situation, not like you have with Spektrum Labs, where you're like, well, we can't do that, but we've got this guy over here, and we've got this gal over here, and we can bring them all together, and you're going to love the price. It won't change. And then when you go to do your cyber insurance, that's going to come down because you can prove you've got MFA properly installed across all your platforms and whatever other guardrails and stuff you have around your AI policy. You don't have an AI policy. That's a joke. But that idea that there is, for a small business owner, or medium-sized business owner now, who's like, oh, another way to spend money. Yeah, but this is a huge problem. You could go out of business if you don't deal with this threat. And there is now an opportunity, as this industry looks to grow, to take advantage of. Like, not unlike it would seem, if you switch from AT&T to Verizon, you're going to save money and get a free phone.
Yeah, and I, that's what I love about Sophos too, frankly, is just it's kind of all under one house. I mean, you don't have to go here for something and to a different company for something else. I mean, I think finding a provider that can give you most of what you need, so you're not looking at 10 different platforms, and you're not, dividing your attention between multiple different teams and things like that. I just think simplifying it, streamlining it, making it affordable. These are key metrics for success on uptake. And I think we're getting there. I think more and more, I mean, obviously there's still a lot more room to grow cyber insurance adoption and MDR adoption, but we're on the right path, I think, directionally. And I'm excited to see how the next few years unfold in that way.
So what do you think about the next 12 to 18 months? Is there anything in particular in the underwriting, or that, I mean, no one knows the future, Jessica. So I want that to be clear and on the record now. So we're not being held to any predictions, because, as we know, there could be a war here or there, and God knows what might change, or some other sort of unplanned catastrophic event that we tend to not plan for. What do you see on the horizon and beyond, to the degree that your view is good?
Yeah, I think, you're starting to see a lot of consolidation happening in the market. You saw Zurich and Beasley. I think that's going to be happening more and more, for where, large global operations that might not have the expertise are going to acquire folks that do. And that's been happening, but I think it'll continue to happen. I think pricing, is pretty soft right now, and I don't anticipate that changing a ton, but I do think it's maybe going to increase and start to harden a little bit, because I think some carriers are getting killed out there. So I think, market wide, you're going to see a lot of that kind of consolidation, people trying to find margin wherever they can, whether it's, offering security services in house, or just getting creative in terms of different revenue streams. But I think in terms of I think the biggest shift we'll see in the next 12 months is with cyber underwriting. I do think that there will be a shift towards telemetry-based underwriting. At least that's my hope. I think people will see that I think we're going to prove that it's a game changer and that it's something that the industry wants and needs, and we're going to be the first to prove that. And I think it's just going to spread. And then I think, ideally, that underwriting is really informed by real telemetry that's continuous and verifiable. And
Yeah,
that's where we're headed.
yeah. You want the air traffic control tower manned whenever there's planes in the air, not just some of the time, right? Um,
Exactly.
you touched on the consolidation now, and it's funny. I mentioned the event I was at earlier in the week, and there was a gentleman from Berkshire Hathaway, and I remembered Warren Buffett at the prior, I think it was last year's big annual sort of hoedown, and he talked about he was asked, or I think he was asked about cyber, and he was circumspect. The gentleman from Berkshire Hathaway who was on the stage today made a comment about how much cash they have, and I thought, wait a second, don't reinvent the wheel. Just go buy some of these companies that are doing it well and have proven some sort of. So I think you're right about that. I think 'cause, again, it's not unlike a lot of things like this where the expertise it's not really insurance expertise, right? It's a far more complex, dynamic reality. We've had fires and burglaries go for years and years now, and this is not something that falls into that. I mean, even weather pattern kind of reality. So I wonder. Yeah, that struck me as really interesting. And funny that you would say it because that Beasley deal. Am I right to say that it was on and then it was off, and then just this week they seem to have announced it's back? It's happening, right? Did I
Yeah,
get that?
I think that's right. I haven't been following it as closely,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think in the past few weeks it's been finalized and determined that that's what's going
Yes.
to happen. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So as promised, we're coming up, or we're at about an hour. Is there anything that we didn't get to that we discussed before that you'd like to touch on? Anything you wanted to mention, even if we didn't bring it up before, that you thought of that you want to leave the audience with?
I don't think so, honestly. I think just stay tuned. I think that, our announcement today, read the quotes from the carriers. I think they speak volumes about just where things are headed in terms of just the value of MDR, and the
Yeah,
trust that they're putting in that service as a real indicator of risk. And just stay tuned. Maybe we can speak again in a year and see how all of this works out.
I think it's a great idea. And then I have to total aside, hat tip to the comms team. When press releases have those sorts of things, those external quotes, it is. I have a whole theory about AI created journalism and why they're starting to look like that. It's just very useful for context, right? Because these are companies, and they're not obviously they have a a, a stake in the game and all that sort of thing. But it is useful. It also makes the press release a little bit easier to read because they can be a bit flat sometimes. A lot of information, don't get me wrong, they're very useful, and I get why they're there. But I was struck by that because you don't see that at times. You see a couple of quotes from an exec with the company, if there's a two company agreement, but that sort of it really sort of elevated my thinking about the news in a way that I maybe wouldn't have had it
I
elevated. So
I appreciate that. We were quite intentional about that, and so I really appreciate that. I think we wanted to leave.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean, again, like we touched on this, like the communicating the need for these services because of the risks that exists, right? And you could say, "Oh, it's just someone trying to sell me insurance. They're trying to take more money from me." But there is a real danger here, and there is no, like we've touched on. There's no fire department. There's no police department. You need a private enterprise and a channel, as you said, of organizations to protect yourself properly. Maybe that changes. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows? But right now, these risks are real. The phrase "if not, but when" is very much alive in the cyber risk kind of reality for businesses of every size. And I think that is, again, like part of communicating that to people is something that is what makes me sort of interested in this field of journalism. And again, like we touched on, it's sort of exudes from a lot of the people in the position you are that, sure, I'm doing this, I'm getting paid, we want to make money, I got a mortgage and all that sort of thing. But this also matters, right? This matters for, the economy and people's personal sense of privacy and all sorts of things that I don't think we quite maybe all appreciate that. That makes it interesting. So again, I mean, it's an aside, but it just again a hat tip to the comms team. I like that very much.
I very much
Um,
appreciate that. Thank you, Martin.
well, so Jessica, anything else?
I don't think so. Just excited for things to come. We're creating real insurance advantage for Sophos MDR customers. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and as always, it's so easy to chat with you, and it flew by. So thank you so much for having me, and look forward to speaking again in the future.
Well, Jessica, my pleasure. Just so you know, in the show notes, there'll be links to Jessica and links to Sophos, and there may be a few other things we've touched on, but we'll put links in there so that you can get to them easily. And again, yeah, Jessica, my pleasure. Likewise, real pleasure to chat. Very easy. It did fly by. So again, thanks so much. And I'm again very, very grateful for the time.
Awesome.
Everyone else, you've just been enjoying Jessica Newman, the global GM of cyber insurance at Sophos. If you've got any questions or comments, you can leave them in wherever you are. There's a comment section, and we'll get an answer, or perhaps we'll forward it on to Jessica because she'll be able to answer. And for the audience watching, really grateful for the time. Very, very thankful that you've been here till the end. I'm Martin Hinton. This is the Cyber Insurance News and Information Podcast. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.